If you listen closely to the hum of electrical current running through the walls of your perfect suburban home, you might hear something else underneath, the faint buzz of betrayal. Or maybe that's just the wiring in this dump. I'm Christopher Tate, and I've spent the last 17 years building what everyone calls the American dream: a successful business, a beautiful wife, 2 daughters who still think I hung the moon, and a house in the kind of neighborhood where people wave from their driveways and pretend to care about your weekend plans. The funny thing about electricity is that it always finds the path of least resistance. People, on the other hand, seem to go out of their way to make things complicated. I co-own Parish Electrical with my brother-in-law Douglas Vance, Doug to his friends, which apparently includes my wife Helena, in ways I'm just beginning to understand. We're the Midwest's largest electrical contracting firm, a title that sounds more impressive than it actually is. What it really means is that we wire strip malls and office buildings while pretending we're not just glorified tradesmen in expensive trucks. Doug married my sister Amelia 3 years ago, right around the time Helena started complaining that I worked too much. Funny how those 2 events seem connected now. Amy's always been the smart one in the family. She handles our books and keeps Doug's more creative interpretations of company policy in check. Or at least she did until recently. The first sign something was wrong came during our annual 4th of July barbecue. Helena's friends clustered around the patio table like a coven of suburban witches, their voices dropping to that particular frequency women use when they're discussing someone's private business. "If I had a husband who worked as much as Chris, I'd be looking elsewhere too," one of them said, loud enough for me to hear over the sizzle of burgers on the grill. Helena laughed, not her real laugh, but that artificial tinkle she uses when she's uncomfortable. "Oh, you know how it is. Men and their toys." I flipped a burger and pretended I hadn't heard, but I filed it away, the way you do when something doesn't quite fit but you're not ready to examine why. The second sign was Helena's sudden interest in personal fitness. She joined a gym, bought new workout clothes, and started disappearing for 2-hour sessions 3 times a week. The strange thing was, she never seemed to lose any weight or gain any muscle tone. When I mentioned this, she got defensive. "Not everyone exercises just to look good, Chris. Some of us do it for our mental health." Right, mental health. That's what we're calling it now. The third sign was Doug's matching gym schedule. Same days, same times, same mysterious lack of results. For a guy who claimed to be serious about getting in shape, he still looked like someone who considered beer a food group. I might be just a working-class electrician, but I'm not stupid. I know how circuits work, and I was starting to see a pattern in the current flow. The confirmation came 3 weeks ago on a Tuesday night when Helena thought I was at a job site in the next county. I'd finished early and decided to surprise her with takeout from that Italian place she likes. Instead, I got surprised by finding her tablet open on the kitchen counter, displaying a message thread that made my stomach drop through the floor. "Can't wait for our next meeting. I'll bring the wine. You bring the excuses." The sender was listed as D in her contacts, but I didn't need a degree in detective work to figure out who that was. I scrolled up through months of messages, each one a small electric shock to my system. Helena: "Chris will be at the Millfield site all day. We have until 6. Doug: "I wish things were different. I wish we could just be together." Helena: "Soon. After Amy has the baby, things will be easier." Amy: "My sister, 8 months pregnant with what she thought was her first child with the man she loved. The man who was apparently planning a future with my wife. I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by the trappings of the life I thought I'd built, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. Not anger, not yet. Something colder and more calculating. I've always been good at solving problems, at finding the most efficient way to get current from point A to point B. This was just another kind of circuit that needed rewiring. I took screenshots of everything, every message, every photo, every casual mention of times and places. I created a new email account and sent copies to myself, then cleared the browser history and put the tablet back exactly where I'd found it. Helena came home 20 minutes later, flushed and slightly out of breath. "How was your workout?" I asked, not looking up from my dinner. "Oh, same old routine." I nodded and took another bite, already planning my next move. The beautiful thing about betrayal is that people think they're so clever when they're doing it. They create elaborate stories, synchronize their schedules, and convince themselves they're criminal masterminds. But they always leave traces. Helena started using more perfume, a sure sign she was seeing someone, or just that I smelled like burnt coffee and regret. She bought new underwear, the expensive kind she used to save for special occasions that had stopped including me months ago. Doug became friendlier at work, asking about my schedule with the kind of casual interest that wasn't casual at all. He started volunteering for jobs that would take me out of town, always with some reasonable business justification that Amy would approve without question. "The Riverside project really needs your personal touch, Chris," he'd say, leaning against my office door frame with that easy smile that had charmed my sister into marriage. "You know how picky they are about the main panel installation." What he really meant was, "Please leave town so I can spend the afternoon with your wife." I started saying yes to everything. Every out-of-town job, every late-night emergency call, every excuse to be anywhere but home. And I started documenting everything: times, dates, locations, building a case like I was preparing for court, which, in a way, I suppose I was. The hardest part was watching Amy. My sister glowed with pregnancy, talking excitedly about nursery colors and baby names, completely oblivious to the fact that her husband was planning to abandon her for the woman who was supposed to be her sister-in-law. She'd call me at work sometimes, just to chat about how wonderful Doug was being, how attentive and caring. "He's going to be such a great father, Chris. I'm so lucky." Yeah, lucky, that's one word for it. 3 days ago, Amy called to invite Helena and me to her baby shower. It would be at our mother's house, she said, with all the usual suspects: family, friends, the kind of gathering where everyone pretends to be happy and supportive while secretly cataloging each other's failures. "Mom's already planning the menu," Amy laughed. "You know how she gets about these things." I knew. Ruth Parish Tate had never met a family gathering she couldn't turn into a production worthy of Broadway. Everything had to be perfect, from the color-coordinated decorations to the precisely timed gift-opening ceremony. "We'll be there," I promised, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something like genuine happiness, because I'd just figured out the perfect venue for my own little production. The thing about electricity is that it builds up slowly, invisibly, until you have enough charge to power something significant, or to cause a spectacular failure, depending on how you direct the current. I spent the next 2 days preparing, not for a baby shower, for a reckoning. Ruth Parish Tate's house looked like a greeting card factory had exploded in shades of yellow and green. My mother had gone with a gender-neutral theme since Amy wanted to be surprised, which meant everything was decorated in colors that somehow managed to be both cheerful and nauseating at the same time. "Christopher, help me move this table," Mom commanded the moment I walked through the door. At 72, she still treated me like I was 12 and incapable of finding my way around without detailed instructions. Helena had arrived separately, claiming she needed to help with the setup. More likely, she needed time to coordinate with Doug about how to act like they barely knew each other. I watched them through the kitchen window as I arranged folding chairs, 2 people working very hard to avoid eye contact, which of course made their connection more obvious than if they'd been holding hands. "Doesn't Helena look lovely today?" Mom asked, following my gaze. "That dress is very flattering." It was. Helena had always known how to dress for an occasion, and today she'd chosen something that made her look younger, more vibrant. The kind of outfit you wear when you want to impress someone. Too bad that someone wasn't her husband. "She's definitely making an effort," I agreed. The guests arrived in waves: Amy's friends from work, neighbors, distant relatives who only appeared for major life events. Doug showed up with his usual easy charm, carrying a gift bag and wearing the kind of smile that had always made people trust him. He was good at this. I had to give him credit. If I hadn't seen the evidence with my own eyes, I might have believed his act too. Amy looked radiant in that way pregnant women do when everything is going according to plan. She'd arranged her gifts on a special table, each one wrapped in coordinating paper and ribbon. The whole scene was so perfectly normal, so exactly what a baby shower should be, that I almost felt guilty about what I was planning to do. Almost. "Chris!" Amy hugged me carefully, working around her considerable belly. "I'm so glad you came. I know these things aren't exactly your favorite." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, and meant it. The ritual of a baby shower is as predictable as a circuit diagram. First comes the mingling, where everyone admires the decorations and compliments the mother-to-be. Then the games, ridiculous activities involving guessing the baby food flavors or measuring Amy's belly with toilet paper. Finally, the main event, opening gifts while everyone watches and makes appropriate cooing sounds. I positioned myself strategically during the gift opening, close enough to be part of the action, but with a clear view of both Helena and Doug. They sat on opposite sides of the room, maintaining their careful distance, but I caught the occasional glance between them, quick looks that lasted just a fraction too long to be casual. Amy opened baby clothes and blankets, a high-tech stroller that required an engineering degree to operate, and enough stuffed animals to stock a toy store. With each gift, she grew more emotional, tears streaming down her face as she thanked everyone for their generosity. "You're all so wonderful," she said, her voice thick with hormones and genuine gratitude. "This baby is going to be so loved." That's when I stood up. "Amy, before you open the last few gifts, I'd like to say something," I announced, pulling my phone from my pocket. The room settled into that expectant quiet you get when someone's about to make a speech. Helena's face went carefully neutral, but I saw her hands tighten in her lap. Doug suddenly found his shoes fascinating. "I know this is supposed to be about celebrating new life and family bonds," I continued, looking around the room at all the familiar faces. "And I think family is incredibly important, which is why I believe in honesty between family members." Amy smiled at me, completely unsuspecting. "That's sweet, Chris." "I found something on Helena's tablet the other day," I said, keeping my voice conversational. "Some messages that I think the family should hear. Consider it my gift to everyone here today." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Helena went pale, and Doug looked like he wanted to bolt for the door. "Chris," Helena said carefully, "maybe this isn't the time." "Oh, I think this is the perfect time," I interrupted. "Amy, these messages are between Helena and someone she calls D in her contacts. I wonder who that could be." I looked directly at Doug, who had gone completely still. "Let me read you a few of my favorites," I continued, scrolling to the screenshots I'd bookmarked. "Here's one from last Tuesday. Can't wait for you to hold me again. Chris will be at the site all day." That's Helena talking, by the way. The silence was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on Mom's thick carpet. And here's the response. "I wish the baby was mine." That's from D. Doug. Would you like to comment on that particular message? Amy made a sound like she'd been punched in the stomach. Her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, understanding, horror, and finally, a kind of broken recognition that made my chest tight. "There are dozens more," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos I was unleashing. "Months of planning and scheming and talking about how much easier things will be after Amy has the baby. Apparently, you two have been very busy." Helena stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "You have no right." "I have every right," I cut her off. "Just like Amy has the right to know that her husband has been planning to leave her for her brother's wife. Just like everyone here has the right to know what kind of people they've been celebrating." Doug finally looked up, his face flushed with shame and anger. "Chris, let's talk about this privately." No. The word came out harder than I intended. We're way past private conversations. You wanted to be together so badly. Here's your chance. Tell everyone how long this has been going on. Tell Amy how you really feel about becoming a father. Amy was crying now. Deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. Our mother rushed to her side, shooting me a look that could have melted steel. "Christopher James Tate," Mom said in her most dangerous voice. "What is the meaning of this?" I held up my phone. "The meaning, Mom, is that your daughter's husband has been having an affair with your son's wife. For months, while Amy's been carrying his child and planning their future together." The room erupted. Amy's friends surrounded her, offering comfort and shooting accusatory looks at Doug and Helena. Some of the older relatives started talking at once, their voices rising in a cacophony of shock and disapproval. Through it all, Amy just sat there, one hand on her belly, tears streaming down her face. When she finally looked at me, her eyes were full of pain, but also something else: gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, barely audible over the chaos. "Thank you for telling me." That's when I knew I'd made the right choice. Whatever came next, whatever consequences I'd have to face, it was worth it to see my sister finally understand what her marriage really was. Helena grabbed her purse and headed for the door, Doug close behind her. But before they could escape, Amy's voice cut through the noise. "Doug." She said his name quietly, but somehow everyone heard it. "Is it true? About the baby?" He stopped, his hand on the doorknob, and for a moment I thought he might actually tell the truth. But then he looked at Helena, and I saw him make his choice. "Amy, I can explain." "Is it true?" she repeated louder this time. He couldn't meet her eyes. "It's complicated." That was all the answer she needed. Amy nodded once, then looked at me again. "Thank you," she said, and this time everyone heard it. As Helena and Doug fled my mother's house, leaving behind a baby shower that had turned into a wake for 2 marriages, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: the satisfaction of a job well done. The current had found its target, and the circuit was complete. The Parish Electrical parking lot felt different when I arrived Monday morning. Maybe it was the way Carl Robertson, my right-hand man, and the closest thing I had to a best friend, avoided eye contact as I passed his truck. Or maybe it was the unusually large group gathered around the coffee station, their conversations trailing off the moment I stepped inside the building. Word travels fast in a small company, especially when that company is run by family members who've just provided the local gossip mill with enough material to last through Christmas. "Morning, Chris," Joanne called from the reception desk, her voice carefully neutral. Joanne had been with us since the beginning, back when Dad first started the company. She knew where all the bodies were buried, metaphorically speaking, and had a talent for managing information flow that would have impressed the CIA. "Morning, Doug in yet?" "Haven't seen him." She didn't meet my eyes either, which told me everything I needed to know about how this was going to go. Doug's office was empty, his desk cleared of the personal items that had accumulated over 3 years of partnership. His company laptop sat in the center of the desk with a note attached. Sorry it had to end this way. Sorry. As if 17 years of marriage and a business partnership could be dismissed with a post-it note apology. I found Amy in the conference room, surrounded by financial documents and looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were red-rimmed but determined, and she was attacking the paperwork with the kind of focused intensity that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. "How are you holding up?" I asked, settling into the chair across from her. "I've been better." She looked up from a stack of invoices. "But I've also been worse. Did you know Doug's been using company funds to pay for a storage unit across town?" "What kind of storage unit?" "The kind where you keep furniture and personal belongings when you're planning to set up a new household." Her voice was steady, but I could hear the anger underneath. "I found the receipts this morning. He's been paying for it for 6 months. 6 months. That meant they'd been planning this long before I discovered the messages." While I'd been working late to build our business, and Amy had been planning nursery colors, Doug and Helena had been preparing their escape route. What else did you find? Amy slid a folder across the table. Credit card statements, hotel receipts, charges for jewelry I've never seen, and this. She handed me a printed email. It was from a real estate agent, addressed to Doug, with listings for rental houses in the next county. All of them were two-bedroom places, perfect for a couple starting fresh. They had it all planned out, I said, more to myself than to Amy. Right down to the timeline. Look at the dates on these emails, Chris. They were going to wait until after the baby was born, let me recover from delivery, and then drop the bomb. Doug would get partial custody, Helena would get alimony from you, and they'd ride off into the sunset together. The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. They'd been planning to destroy two families, traumatize children, and tear apart a business, all so they could play house together without the inconvenience of starting over financially. Well, I said, closing the folder, I guess we messed up their timeline. Amy laughed, a sound with no humor in it. You could say that. The next few hours were a masterclass in corporate damage control. Amy, despite being 8 months pregnant and emotionally devastated, transformed into a force of nature. She called our lawyer, our accountant, and our insurance agent. She changed passwords, froze accounts, and began the process of legally removing Doug from all company operations. I handled the staff meeting, explaining that Doug was no longer with the company and that Amy would be taking over his responsibilities as CEO. There were questions, of course, but I kept my answers professional. The personal drama was nobody's business but ours. Carl lingered after the others left. You want to talk about what really happened? Not particularly. Fair enough. He paused at the door. For what it's worth, I always thought Doug was a little too smooth. Never trusted guys who smile that much. By lunchtime, the immediate crisis was under control, but I knew the real challenges were just beginning. Helena would lawyer up, probably try to claim I'd violated her privacy by reading her messages. She'd go for the house, the kids, and as much of my assets as she could grab. Doug would probably try to claim he was owed severance or partnership compensation. They were both about to learn that I'd inherited more than just electrical skills from my father. I'd also gotten his talent for strategic thinking and his absolute intolerance for people who tried to cheat the system. I was reviewing contracts when Joanne knocked on my office door. Chris, there's someone here to see you. Helena stood in the reception area, looking smaller than I remembered. She'd traded yesterday's flattering dress for jeans and a sweater, and her face was bare of makeup. For a moment, she looked like the woman I'd married 17 years ago, before ambition and dissatisfaction had turned her into someone I didn't recognize. We need to talk, she said. I think we said everything that needed saying yesterday. Please, just 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I led her to my office and closed the door. She sat in the chair across from my desk, the same chair where she used to sit when she'd bring me lunch during the early days of our marriage. I know you're angry, she began. Angry doesn't begin to cover it. I never meant for it to happen this way. Doug and it just happened. We tried to fight it, but... Stop. I held up a hand. Just stop. You didn't try to fight anything. You planned this for months. The storage unit, the house hunting, the timeline. You were going to wait until Amy recovered from childbirth and then destroy her life. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending this was some kind of accidental romance. She flinched like I'd slapped her. You don't understand. You're never home, Chris. You care more about this business than you do about me or the girls. I was lonely. So, you decided to sleep with my sister's husband. That's your solution to loneliness? I want us to work this out, for Beau and Bree's sake. You should have thought about the girls before you started planning your new life with Doug. Helena's composure cracked. You had no right to humiliate me like that, in front of everyone, your mother, the neighbors, Amy's friends. How am I supposed to face any of them again? That's not my problem anymore. The girls are going to hate me. The girls are going to hate both of us before this is over. But at least they'll know I didn't lie to them." She stood up, her face flushed with anger. "You think you've won something? You think destroying my reputation and Doug's career makes you the hero in this story? I think I prevented my sister from wasting more years on a man who was planning to abandon her. I think I stopped my daughters from growing up in a house built on lies. If that makes me the villain in your version of events, I can live with that." Helena left without another word, and I sat in my office feeling oddly empty. There should have been satisfaction in that confrontation, some sense of justice served. Instead, I just felt tired. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You have no idea what you've started. This isn't over." I deleted it without responding. Doug could make all the threats he wanted. I'd already won the only battle that mattered, the one for the truth. But as I looked out my office window at the parking lot where Helena's car was pulling away, I had the distinct feeling that the war was just beginning. The Riverside Tavern had seen better decades. It was the kind of place where contractors went to complain about clients, where divorced men nursed beers and regrets in equal measure, and where Doug Vance apparently thought he could hide from the consequences of his choices. I'd gotten the tip from Carl, who'd heard from a supplier that Doug was holding court at the bar, telling anyone who'd listen about how I'd ambushed him and Helena at the baby shower. According to the story making the rounds, I was a jealous husband who couldn't handle his wife finding happiness with a better man. The narrative needed correction. Doug was exactly where Carl said he'd be, sitting at the far end of the bar with a half-empty pitcher of beer and the defeated posture of a man whose carefully laid plans had exploded in his face. He'd traded his usual button-down shirt for a wrinkled polo, and his normally perfect hair looked like he'd been running his hands through it. The bartender, a thick-set woman with arms like a longshoreman, looked up as I approached. "You drinking or starting trouble?" "Depends on how reasonable my brother-in-law feels like being." Doug turned at the sound of my voice, and I saw him calculate his options: run, fight, or try to talk his way out of this. Being Doug, he chose option 3. "Chris, I was hoping we could talk." "Were you? Because from what I hear, you've been doing plenty of talking already. Something about me being a jealous husband who can't handle losing his wife to a superior man?" A few other patrons had turned to watch our conversation. Good. An audience was exactly what I wanted. "Look, I know you're upset." "Upset?" I kept my voice conversational, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Doug, upset is what you feel when your team loses the playoffs. What I feel is something entirely different." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to one of the screenshots I hadn't shared at the baby shower. Here's one of my favorites. "Helena, to you, 3 weeks ago. I can't wait to get away from Chris and his boring life. You make me feel alive again." And your response, "Soon, baby. Once Amy has the kid, we'll be free." The bar had gone completely quiet. Doug's face was turning red, whether from embarrassment or anger, I couldn't tell. "That's private," he said. "Was private. Now it's evidence of what kind of man you really are." I looked around the room. See, Doug here was planning to wait until my sister recovered from childbirth, then leave her for my wife. Classy guy, right? Someone at a nearby table muttered something unflattering about Doug's character. The bartender was watching with the kind of interest people show for traffic accidents. "You want to know what the really pathetic part is?" I continued. "He couldn't even afford to leave on his own, had to use company money to pay for his secret storage unit, had to wait for Helena's divorce settlement to fund their new life together." Doug stood up abruptly, his stool scraping against the floor. "That's enough." "Is it? Because I've got about 6 months' worth of messages here. Want me to read the ones where you two laugh about how stupid Amy and I are? Or maybe the ones where you plan exactly how to manipulate the custody arrangements so you can still see your kid without having to actually be responsible for them?" "I said that's enough." Doug's voice cracked like a teenager's. I stepped closer, close enough that only he could hear my next words. You're right. It is enough. More than enough. You want to know what happens next, Doug? You're going to disappear. You're going to find a job in another state, far away from my sister and her baby, far away from my wife and my daughters, and if I ever see you near any of them again, I'll make today look like a friendly conversation. Doug tried to stare me down, but whatever he saw in my face made him look away first. He threw a 20 on the bar and headed for the door, but I wasn't done. Hey, Doug. He stopped but didn't turn around. Amy asked me to give you a message. She says thanks for showing her who you really are before the baby was born. Saves her the trouble of pretending to respect you for the next 18 years. He left without responding, and the bar slowly returned to its normal volume. The bartender refilled my glass without being asked. That was your brother-in-law? She asked. Former brother-in-law, and former business partner, and former friend. I took a sip of beer. Turns out he was never really any of those things. Men like that, she said, wiping down glasses with practiced efficiency. They always think they're smarter than everyone else, right up until they get caught. I finished my beer and left a generous tip. Outside, the parking lot was empty except for my truck. Doug's car was gone, probably headed back to whatever hole he'd been hiding in since the baby shower. My phone rang as I was driving home. Amy's name appeared on the screen. How did it go? She asked. He got the message. Good. Chris, I need to tell you something. I went to the doctor today. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Is everything okay? The baby's fine, but I asked them to run a paternity test. I had to know. And? Doug's the father. Whatever else he is, he's not a liar about that. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the truck, engine running, trying to process this information. Part of me had hoped the baby wasn't Doug's, that Amy could make a clean break and start over. But life rarely offers such convenient solutions. What are you going to do? Raise my child, with or without Doug, preferably without. You know I'll help however I can. I know. Chris, what you did at the shower, reading those messages, I know it was hard, but I needed to hear the truth, even if it hurt. After we hung up, I sat in my driveway looking at the house I'd bought for Helena, thinking about the life I'd built that was now falling apart piece by piece. The porch light was on, which meant Helena was home. We'd have to talk eventually, figure out custody arrangements and property division, and all the other tedious details of dismantling a marriage. But not tonight. Tonight, I just wanted to sit in my truck and listen to the engine idle and pretend that everything was still the way it used to be, back when I thought I knew the people I loved best. My phone buzzed with another text from the same unknown number. Enjoy your victory lap. It won't last long. This time, I didn't delete it. Instead, I forwarded it to Amy with a message. Doug's not taking this well. Might want to change your locks. Some battles end with a clear winner. Others just pause long enough for everyone to reload. The courthouse steps were slick with morning dew as I met with Janet Morrison, the divorce attorney Amy had recommended. Janet was exactly what I'd hoped for. Mid-50s, sharp-eyed, and possessed of the kind of professional cynicism that comes from years of watching marriages implode. Your wife's attorney filed for emergency custody, she said without preamble, handing me a stack of legal documents. Claims you're emotionally unstable and potentially dangerous to the children. I scanned the paperwork, recognizing Helena's handiwork in every carefully crafted accusation. According to her petition, I'd become increasingly volatile and controlling, culminating in a public attack at a family gathering that had left her fearing for her safety and that of the children. She's also claiming you violated her privacy by accessing her personal communications without consent, Janet continued. Wants the court to exclude any evidence obtained through what she's calling illegal surveillance. The tablet was sitting open on our kitchen counter, in our house. That I pay for. I know. And legally, you're in the clear. Married couples don't have the same privacy expectations as strangers. but she's painting a picture of a controlling husband who spies on his wife and then uses private information to humiliate her publicly. We walked into the courthouse together, Janet's heels clicking against the marble floor with the confidence of someone who'd fought these battles before. Helena was already there with her attorney, a younger man in an expensive suit who looked like he'd stepped out of a legal drama. Helena had dressed for the part. Conservative blue dress, minimal makeup, the picture of a vulnerable woman seeking protection from an unreasonable husband. She didn't look at me as we took our seats on opposite sides of the courtroom. Judge Patricia Williams was known for her no-nonsense approach to family law, which worked in my favor. She listened to Helena's attorney present his case for emergency custody, his voice full of righteous indignation as he described my calculated campaign of harassment and public humiliation. Then it was Janet's turn. "Your Honor, Mr. Tate discovered that his wife was having an affair with his business partner and sister's husband. Rather than confronting them privately, where they could continue their deception, he chose to reveal the truth to family members who had a right to know. Mrs. Tate's claim of feeling unsafe is particularly interesting, given that she's been living in the family home for the past week with no incidents of violence or threats." Janet presented the printed messages, each one time-stamped and verified. She showed the credit card statements, documenting months of hotel visits and expensive gifts. She presented the real estate emails proving premeditation. "This isn't a case of domestic violence or emotional instability, Your Honor. This is a case of a woman who got caught cheating and is now trying to use the legal system to punish her husband for exposing her infidelity." Judge Williams reviewed the evidence with the thoroughness of someone who'd seen every possible variation of marital warfare. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of years spent sorting truth from manipulation. "Mrs. Tate, I'm not seeing evidence of the pattern of controlling or dangerous behavior your attorney has described. What I am seeing is evidence of a lengthy extramarital affair that you conducted with your husband's business partner and sister's husband. While Mr. Tate's method of revealing this information was certainly dramatic, it doesn't constitute grounds for emergency custody." Helena's face went pale. Her attorney whispered something urgent in her ear, but she shook her head. "However," Judge Williams continued, "given the level of animosity between the parties, I'm ordering temporary custody arrangements that will minimize conflict. Mr. Tate, you'll have the children Sunday through Wednesday. Mrs. Tate, you'll have them Thursday through Saturday. Neither party is to discuss the divorce proceedings or the circumstances leading to them with the children." It wasn't everything I'd hoped for, but it was better than losing my daughters to Helena's manipulations. As we filed out of the courtroom, Helena's attorney pulled Janet aside for a whispered conversation that looked heated. "What was that about?" I asked when Janet returned. "They want to negotiate. Apparently your wife's position isn't as strong as she thought it was." That afternoon, I picked up Beau and Bree from school, dreading the conversation I knew we had to have. They'd been staying with their grandmother since the baby shower, insulated from the worst of the drama but not immune to its effects. "Dad," Beau said as soon as she got in the truck, "Mom says you're getting divorced." "That's right. Because of what you said at Aunt Amy's party?" I looked at my 15-year-old daughter in the rearview mirror, seeing Helena's eyes but my own stubborn chin. "No, sweetheart. Because your mother and I can't trust each other anymore." Bree, 13, and still young enough to believe that parents could fix anything if they really wanted to, started crying. "Can't you just say you're sorry and make up?" "Some things can't be fixed with apologies, Bree. Sometimes people make choices that change everything." We drove home in silence, the weight of their disappointment settling over me like a heavy blanket. I'd protected Amy from years of lies, but I'd also shattered my daughter's sense of security. The mathematics of that trade-off would haunt me for years. That evening, as I helped Bree with her math homework and listened to Beau practice guitar, I tried to pretend that this could be our new normal, but the house felt different with Helena's presence looming over everything. Her clothes still in the closet, her coffee mug still in the sink, her half of our life still occupying space she'd forfeited the right to claim. My phone rang just as I was tucking Bree into bed. Unknown number again, but this time I answered. Chris Tate. You think you're so smart. Doug's voice was slurred with alcohol and self-pity. You think you've won something. Doug, if you're calling to threaten me, I'm calling to tell you the truth. Helena never loved you. She told me all about it, how boring you were, how she felt trapped in this pathetic life you built for her. She was planning to leave you long before I came along. I walked into my bedroom and closed the door so the girls wouldn't hear. If that's supposed to hurt my feelings, you'll have to try harder. She's pregnant, Chris. Helena's pregnant with my baby. The room went very still. I sat down on the edge of my bed, phone pressed to my ear, trying to process what he'd just said. You're lying. Am I? Ask her. Ask her about the doctor's appointment she had 3 weeks ago. Ask her why she's been so tired lately, why she's been getting sick in the mornings. The line went quiet. Doug had hung up, leaving me alone with information that changed everything. Helena, pregnant with Doug's child. Helena, who'd been planning to leave me anyway. Helena, who'd been living in my house, sleeping in my bed, eating meals with my daughters, all while carrying another man's baby. I called Janet Morrison's emergency number. I need to know if my wife is pregnant, I said when she answered. And if she is, I need to know how that changes our custody arrangement. Chris, it's 11 o'clock at night. Can this wait until morning? No, it can't. Because some revelations are too big to sleep on, and some betrayals cut too deep to wait for business hours to address. The pregnancy test sat on Helena's bathroom counter like evidence at a crime scene. 2 pink lines that confirmed what Doug had told me and explained so much about Helena's recent behavior. I'd found it while looking for aspirin, tucked behind her makeup case like a secret she wasn't ready to share. 3 weeks. She'd known for 3 weeks and said nothing, even as we sat in family court dividing up our children's lives. Even as she accused me of being unstable and dangerous. Even as she played the victim of my supposed cruelty. I took a picture of the test with my phone and sent it to Janet Morrison with a simple message. Found this in Helena's bathroom. How does this change things? Her response came back within minutes. Emergency hearing. Tomorrow morning. Don't confront her until we talk. But confrontation found me instead. Helena came home while I was making breakfast for the girls, her key turning in the lock with the familiar sound that used to mean comfort and now just meant complications. What are you doing here? She asked, seeing me at the stove. Making pancakes for our daughters. It's my custody time, remember? She looked tired, older than her 38 years, and I found myself wondering how long she'd been carrying the weight of her deceptions. The pregnancy explained the recent changes in her appearance, the fuller face, the way she'd started wearing looser clothes, the exhaustion that no amount of sleep seemed to cure. We need to talk, she said. Yes, we do, but not in front of the girls. Beau and Bree came downstairs then, the awkwardness of their parents sharing the same space written across their faces. They ate breakfast in careful silence, both of them hyper-aware of the tension crackling between Helena and me. After I dropped them at school, I returned home to find Helena waiting in the living room. She'd changed into jeans and a sweater that couldn't quite hide what I now recognized as the early signs of pregnancy. Doug told you, she said without preamble. He did. 3 weeks, Helena? You've known for 3 weeks and said nothing? I was trying to figure out what to do. What to do? You mean whether to tell me the baby isn't mine, or just let me find out when it's born? She flinched. It's not that simple. It seems pretty simple to me. You're pregnant with your lover's baby. You've been lying to me, to our daughters, to the court. How much simpler could it be? Helena started crying then, the kind of tears that come from exhaustion rather than manipulation. I never wanted it to happen this way. How did you want it to happen? You and Doug riding off into the sunset with 3 kids between you? Amy raising Doug's first child alone while you two played house with his second? You don't understand what it's like, being married to someone who cares more about work than about you. I felt invisible, Chris. Like I was just another piece of furniture in your perfect life. So you decided to have an affair with my sister's husband. And when that wasn't enough, you decided to have his baby. I didn't plan to get pregnant, but you did plan everything else. The storage unit, the house hunting, the timeline. You planned to destroy Amy's life and mine so you could have what you wanted. Helena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. What happens now? Now you tell our daughters the truth. You tell them why we're really getting divorced, and you tell them about the baby. I can't do that. They'll hate me. They might. But they'll hate you more if they find out you lied to them about this too. My phone buzzed with a text from Amy. Emergency. Can you come to the hospital? I showed Helena the message. We'll finish this later. Amy needs me. Chris, wait. What are you going to tell the court about the baby? The truth. Something you should try sometime. The drive to the hospital took forever, traffic conspiring against me at every intersection. I found Amy in the maternity ward, pale and frightened, hooked up to monitors that beeped with electronic urgency. What happened? Contractions started this morning. They're trying to stop them. It's too early. She grabbed my hand. Chris, I'm scared. What if something happens to the baby? Nothing's going to happen. You're in the best place you can be. A nurse came in to check Amy's monitors, her expression professionally neutral. The contractions have slowed down, but we want to keep you overnight for observation. After the nurse left, Amy turned to me with the kind of direct gaze that meant she had something difficult to say. I know about Helena. Know what about Helena? That she's pregnant. Doug called me this morning, drunk and crying. He told me everything. I sat down in the uncomfortable hospital chair, suddenly feeling every one of my 42 years. I'm sorry, Amy. I'm sorry you had to find out like this. Are you? Because part of me thinks you're glad. Now everyone can see exactly what kind of people they really are. She wasn't wrong. There was a part of me that felt vindicated by Helena's pregnancy, proof that my accusations of betrayal and deception were even more justified than I'd known. But there was also a part of me that felt sick about the whole situation. 2 families destroyed, children hurt, lives upended for what? So Doug and Helena could play out some middle-aged fantasy of true love? What are you going to do? Amy asked. Take care of my daughters, fight for custody, try to rebuild some kind of life that makes sense. And Helena? Helena made her choice. Now she gets to live with the consequences. Amy squeezed my hand. I'm glad you're my brother, Chris. I'm glad you told the truth, even when it hurt. As I sat in that hospital room, watching my sister fight to keep her baby safe, I thought about the chain of events that had brought us here. If I hadn't found Helena's tablet, if I hadn't read those messages, if I hadn't chosen to expose the truth at the baby shower, would Amy be here now, stressed and scared, or would she be at home preparing for Doug's departure, blindsided by a betrayal she never saw coming? Sometimes the right choice is also the hardest one. Sometimes protecting the people you love means destroying the life you thought you wanted. My phone rang. Helena's name on the screen. The girls know, she said when I answered. Bree came home from school and found me being sick in the bathroom. She asked if I was pregnant, and I couldn't lie to her anymore. What did you tell them? The truth. That I'm having a baby with Doug, and that's why we're getting divorced. How did they take it? Bo locked herself in her room. Bree asked if the baby would be their brother or sister, and when I said yes, she asked if that meant Doug would be their stepfather. Helena's voice broke. Chris, I've ruined everything. I've ruined our family, Amy's family, and now I'm bringing a baby into this mess. For the first time in weeks, Helena sounded like the woman I'd married, vulnerable, scared, and finally willing to acknowledge the magnitude of what she'd done. "Yes," I said, "you have ruined everything, but that baby didn't choose any of this. Whatever happens between us, that child deserves better than being born into a war zone." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying figure out what kind of mother you want to be, because the choices you make now are going to affect that kid for the rest of their life." After I hung up, I sat with Amy until visiting hours ended, both of us lost in our own thoughts about the future we were facing. Two babies, born into the wreckage of their parents' mistakes. Two families, torn apart by betrayal and deception. And somewhere in the middle of it all, the hope that maybe, somehow, we could build something better from the pieces. The monitor next to Amy's bed beeped steadily, counting heartbeats and contractions, marking time until her baby decided to enter this complicated world. I listened to that electronic rhythm and tried to imagine a future where all of this made sense, where the pain we were feeling now would seem worth it. Some circuits, once broken, can never be repaired. But sometimes, if you're careful and patient and willing to start over, you can build something new from the salvaged parts. The emergency custody hearing took place on a gray Thursday morning, the kind of day that makes everything look washed out and tired. Helena sat across the courtroom, looking like she'd aged 5 years in the past week, her pregnancy now obvious to anyone who cared to look. Judge Williams reviewed the new evidence, with the same methodical attention she'd shown before, but I could see the disapproval in her expression as she processed the implications of Helena's pregnancy. "Mrs. Tate, when we met last week, you failed to disclose that you were pregnant with another man's child. This is the kind of omission that undermines your credibility with this court." Helena's attorney, looking less confident than he had the week before, stood to respond. "Your Honor, my client was still processing the implications of her pregnancy and wasn't prepared to make it part of the public record." "The public record? Mr. Harrison, this is a custody hearing for the children of this marriage. The fact that Mrs. Tate is carrying another man's child while seeking custody of her existing children is absolutely relevant to this court's decision." Janet Morrison stood to present our case, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd been proven right about everything she'd predicted. "Your Honor, Mr. Tate has been the primary financial provider for his family throughout his marriage. He owns a successful business, has strong community ties, and has demonstrated remarkable restraint in dealing with his wife's infidelity. Mrs. Tate, by contrast, has been conducting an affair with her husband's business partner, has become pregnant by her lover, and has repeatedly misrepresented the facts to this court." The judge listened to arguments about custody schedules and financial support, but I could tell the decision had already been made. Helena's pregnancy had shifted the entire dynamic of the case, transforming her from a potentially sympathetic figure into someone whose judgment was clearly compromised. "I'm awarding primary custody to Mr. Tate," Judge Williams announced. "Mrs. Tate will have supervised visitation until after the birth of her child, at which point we'll revisit the arrangement." Helena started crying, the kind of broken sobs that come from finally understanding the full cost of your choices. Her attorney whispered something that might have been comfort, but she shook her head and continued crying. Outside the courthouse, Helena approached me with the defeated posture of someone who'd run out of options. "I know you hate me," she said. "I don't hate you, Helena. I'm disappointed in you. There's a difference. The girls won't talk to me. Bo won't even come to the phone when I call. They're 15 and 13. They're trying to process the fact that their mother is having another man's baby. Give them time." "How much time? How long before they forgive me?" "I don't know. Maybe never. That's the chance you took when you decided Doug was worth more than your family." Helena wiped her eyes with a tissue that had seen better days. "He left, you know. Doug. As soon as he found out about the baby, he panicked and left town. I haven't heard from him in 3 days." I wasn't surprised. Doug had always been better at starting things than finishing them, and the reality of impending fatherhood combined with the wreckage of his reputation had probably sent him running for the nearest exit. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. My mother says I can stay with her until the baby's born, but after that—" She shrugged. "I guess I'll figure it out." "Helena, for what it's worth, I hope you do figure it out. That baby deserves a mother who has her life together." "Chris, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am sorry." "I believe you. But sorry doesn't undo the damage." That evening, I sat in my living room with Beau and Bree, trying to explain the judge's decision in terms they could understand. Beau, with the brutal honesty of a teenager, asked the question I'd been dreading. "Are you happy that we're going to live with you instead of Mom?" "I'm happy that you're going to be with me, yes. But I'm not happy about why it happened." "Because Mom cheated on you?" "Because your mother made choices that hurt a lot of people, including you two." Bree, curled up next to me on the couch, looked up with the kind of serious expression that made her seem older than 13. "Is the baby going to be our brother or sister?" "Biologically, yes. But that doesn't mean anything has to change between us." "Will we have to see the baby?" "Only if you want to, and only when you're ready." Beau stood up abruptly. "I'm never going to be ready. Mom chose that baby over us. She chose Doug over Dad. She chose her new life over our family. Why should I care about her baby?" She left the room before I could answer, her footsteps heavy on the stairs. Bree watched her go with the kind of sadness that comes from watching your family fall apart in real time. "Dad, is it wrong that I'm mad at Mom?" "No, sweetheart, it's not wrong. You have every right to be angry." "But she's still our mom." "Yes, she is. And someday when you're ready, you might want to have a relationship with her again. But that's your choice to make, and you don't have to make it now." 2 weeks later, Amy gave birth to a healthy baby boy she named Michael, after our father. I held my nephew in the hospital, marveling at how something so small could represent so much hope after so much destruction. "He looks like Dad," Amy said, exhaustion and joy competing in her voice. "He looks like trouble," I said, but I was smiling. "Chris, I want you to know something. What you did, exposing Doug and Helena, it was the right thing. I know it cost you your marriage, but it saved me from years of living a lie. It cost us both our marriages. No, Doug cost us our marriages. You just made sure I found out before I wasted any more time on him." As I drove home from the hospital, I thought about the events of the past month. The discovery, the confrontation, the legal battles, and the slow process of rebuilding our lives from the wreckage. Helena had moved in with her mother and was working part-time at a retail job. Her dreams of a new life with Doug reduced to the reality of single motherhood and limited prospects. Doug had resurfaced briefly to sign away his parental rights to Amy's baby and to provide a forwarding address for child support purposes. He'd found work in another state, far enough away to avoid the daily reminders of what he'd lost, but close enough for the legal system to track him down when necessary. The girls were adjusting slowly, Beau with the angry resilience of a teenager who'd learned not to trust adults, and Bree with the careful optimism of someone young enough to believe that broken things could still be fixed. As for me, I was learning to live in the spaces between what I'd lost and what I'd gained. I'd lost a marriage, but I'd gained the respect of my daughters and the knowledge that I'd done the right thing when it mattered most. I'd lost a business partner, but I'd gained a company that was finally free from the complications of family drama. Some nights, lying in bed in the house that now felt too big and too quiet, I wondered if I could have handled things differently. Maybe I could have confronted Helena privately, given her a chance to end the affair and save our marriage. Maybe I could have spared Amy the public humiliation of learning about Doug's betrayal in front of her entire family. But then I remembered the messages, the cold calculation behind months of deception, and the way Doug had talked about Amy and her unborn child like they were obstacles to be managed rather than people to be loved. Some betrayals are too fundamental to forgive, and some trust, once broken, can never be repaired. The electrical current always finds the path of least resistance, but sometimes the shortest path leads through the most damage. Sometimes the only way to fix a faulty circuit is to strip it down to the bare wires and start over. I'd chosen truth over comfort, justice over peace, and the long-term welfare of my family over the short-term preservation of my marriage. Whether that made me a hero or a fool would be for others to decide. All I knew was that when my daughters looked at me now, they saw someone who'd fought for them when it mattered most. And when I looked in the mirror, I saw someone who'd chosen the harder path because it was the right one. The house was quiet as I pulled into the driveway, porch light glowing like a beacon in the darkness. Inside, my daughters were probably doing homework, or watching television, or texting friends about the complicated reality of their new lives. Tomorrow, there would be more challenges. Custody visits with Helena, legal paperwork to file, the ongoing process of rebuilding trust and stability. But tonight, there was just the satisfaction of knowing that the truth had been told, justice had been served, and the people I loved most were safe. I turned off the truck and sat for a moment in the darkness, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear the hum of electrical current running through power lines, carrying energy from one place to another with the reliable efficiency that had built my career and my life. Some circuits are designed to last forever. Others burn out spectacularly, leaving nothing but smoke and the memory of what used to be. But if you're patient and careful and willing to do the hard work of rebuilding, you can always wire something new.